Hey everyone, welcome to LinkedIn Presents Redefining Work podcast. I'm your host, Lars Schmidt. And today I'm really excited to be sitting down with Guy Kawasaki. Guy is the chief evangelist for Canva, a tool that you know I am a huge fan of, and he is the author of several books, including his most recent book, Think Remarkable. So Guy, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I would love to have you just open with what would you like the audience to know about you?
Well, you kind of told them what I want them to know about me. So yeah, I'm chief evangelist of Canva. I used to be chief evangelist of Apple. I'm host of the Remarkable People podcast right now. And I'm author of this new book called Think Remarkable. What else? What else could I possibly want people to know?
You know, I think your background goes pretty deep. So I think if you really wanted a long bio, you could have that. But but rather than that, we could jump right in.
I do want people to know that I did not write Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's Kiyosaki. This is Kawasaki.
Yeah, okay. That is that disclaimer has been established. The audience now knows, and I'll be sure to scrub those questions from our discussion.
We just lost half our listeners right there.
You know, before we even get into your background, like you know, again, I imagine most of our audience is familiar with you and your work. You've been, a longstanding leader in the technology and digital space, somebody who has really been kind of helping establish where these industries are going over the last 2 decades plus. And I wanted, before we even get into your current work, I want to go way back. Like, what was young Guy like? Were there things in your upbringing as a child that kind of stoked this passion for technology and this curiosity?
Listen, I could give you the beauty contest answer, but let me be truthful, okay?
Yeah.
So one of the theories that I have in my book is that it does not matter how you got motivated, only that you got motivated. You know, what's the end result? And if it's working hard and studying hard, you know, just declare victory and don't worry why you got to that point. So I'm telling you this because I'm going to tell you these stories. So I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, in a relatively low-income place. Not total, abject poverty, but I mean, we were definitely not rich, although I did not know we were poor because I just didn't know any difference.
Yeah.
So anyway, thankfully, a 6th grade teacher in a public school convinced my parents to send me to a private school so I could be in the sort of college prep channel. And thank you, God, my parents listened to her and made the sacrifice to make this possible. So anyway, the school was all the way across town. So I used to catch the bus to the school and home. And twice in my school there, I was robbed on the bus by other kids, okay? And then another thing that happened when I was in high school is some family friend gave me a ride in their Porsche 911. I'm telling you these stories because when you ask authors often, what shaped you, what made you write this book, what helped you get motivated and all that, they tell you all these great stories of, I wanted to end climate change. I wanted to ensure, democracy. I wanted to make sure that people were safe and had fresh water and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm telling you that what motivated me when I was a young kid was I don't want to live in a place where you get robbed in the bus, and I want to drive a Porsche. And so those 3 seemingly insipid, kind of shallow things really were big motivations in my life. And the only way I can rationalize that is to say that, as I said, it doesn't matter how you got motivated, only that you got motivated. And those 3 things motivated me. That's the God's honest truth.
Yeah. Well, I think, so that I feel like the obligatory follow-on question is, how old were you when you got your first Porsche? That was the goal you were working towards in the early days.
Yeah, let me think about that. Wow, it was probably a 924 turbo. So probably the mid 70s. So by then I was born in 54. So let's say I was 25 years old or something like that. Yeah.
I can imagine, turning the key in that ignition the first time, the feeling you must have felt when that dream became real.
Let me think about this more.
Yeah.
It can't be 1974 because in 1974, I was still in college. So it had to be when I was more like, I was at Apple the first time. So I was at Apple from 83 to 87. So it would be like 1987. So I would have been 33 or so.
Okay.
All
right. Well, I want to take you back to the Apple days kind of through now, because you obviously, spent the formative early stages of your career at Apple and obviously working on, within the Think Different campaign and just seeing the evolution of personal computing, riding that through over the last several decades, seeing the emergence of the digital technology, social media, this kind of next generation that we're in right now, where we're seeing this emergence of consumer grade AI. How do you think about the landscape of technology today? You've seen so much evolution over your career. When you kind of weigh in on where we are in this moment in time, how do you describe it? How do you think about it?
Well, I think that there's this tsunami that just ran through the whole place, which is called artificial intelligence. And I think that AI is a bigger deal than the personal computer, maybe the Industrial Revolution. It's just such a game changer. And it's a game changer not because it happened at this high level, sort of strategic, Fortune 500 kind of boardroom, but I think it's just affecting people every day. I mean, whether, like, I use it as a writer every day. People use it to, write Yelp review responses. I mean, teachers use it for lesson plans. I mean, this is not an elitist tool. This is a tool that, a year and a half ago, who the hell ever heard of ChatGPT right now?
Yeah.
Who has not heard of ChatGPT a year and a half later? I'm stunned at the rate of adoption of LLMs.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, because this is moving so fast, we almost have to timestamp this conversation, right? Like we're recording this in April of 2024. And you're right, 6 months ago, November 2022 was when ChatGPT was released. So, or a year and a half ago. So we're kind of in this early stage, and the adoption that we've seen just in the last 18 months has been mind-blowing. And I want to you mentioned you use it for writing. I'd love to get other use cases of how you use, whether it's ChatGPT or other kind of generative AI tools today.
Well, in my writing, I use it as a research assistant. So it helps me find examples. Like it helped me find Julia Child as an example of someone who made a big career shift from being spook to being a chef. I never would have known that without ChatGPT. I use it to check my grammar, to check, spelling and all that kind of stuff. I use Quillbot, which is another form of AI. And I also use it because I believe that in this theory of, you want to summarize every section of your book so people can get this trigger that, that's what I just read, and hammer it home. So I would use Claude to read the section and then write me a summary of what the section contained. And I found that Claude did that really fast and really well. So now, some people may be freaking out, like saying, so Guy, who wrote your book, right? And I'm telling you, this is not how it occurred, and I don't think it can occur, which is you can't just go to ChatGPT and say, okay, give me 75,000 word manuscript explaining how to be remarkable. I want at least 10 chapters. Each chapter should be at least 10 pages. And, I want you to use bullets and subheads and heads and use examples from business from all over the world. And 60 seconds later, you have a finished book. That just, it doesn't work like that. And I think that I have a moral obligation to provide the best book that I can to help people make a difference and be remarkable. And the best book I can means that I'm going to use AI to do it, to help me do research, help me do summaries, help me do grammar checking and all that. And because at the end of the day, when someone reads a book, they're not sitting there wondering, I wonder who generated this sentence. Was it Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini, or Quillbot? I mean, it either resonates with them and helps them make a difference, or it creates enjoyment for them, or it doesn't. And, to use a food analogy, when you go to a restaurant, you want a great meal. You don't care if they use a microwave or convection oven or electric knife or food processor. You just want great food. What's the difference?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Look, I think let's be real now. I mean, very few, if any, authors aren't using these tools on some level, whether it's research, whether it's, generating summaries, whether it's brainstorming ideas. I mean, there's limitless ways that we can leverage these tools.
I created this landing page for my book, and I, as a podcaster, 52 times a year, I have to read a book. Well, sometimes I interview people who don't have a book, but most of the time it's somebody with a new book, right? So you're reading this book, and these books are 200-300 pages long, and it takes a long time to read those books and come up with questions. So I figured, as now I'm on the opposite side, so I'm going to do every podcaster who's going to interview me a favor. I'm going to come up with a bunch of questions that they should ask me about the book. Now, I've seen that. I use a PR firm called Fortier, and they often provide you like a 2-page summary. And, these are the 10 questions to ask this author. But if you send that pitch of 10 questions to 250 podcasters, you're going to get asked the same questions over and over. So I swear to God, this is what I did. I took my manuscript, I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, come up with 99 questions that a podcaster should ask the author of this book. And it did it. And I edited that, and I put it on my landing page. So now if you're a podcaster and you want to interview me and you're too lazy to read the book, God bless you, I can relate to that. I have pre-formed questions for you, 99 of them.
I mean, look at that. ChatGPT is, it's doing the work. It's bringing efficiencies. And that's actually really smart because, of those 250, 245 are probably going to be doing the same thing on their end. So at least now you can make sure they're good questions that, we're leveraging AI for.
But, I will tell you, I thought, this is really good. So maybe I can stick in the digital form of a manuscript and then tell ChatGPT to tell me what to ask the author. And that I found does not work at all, because ChatGPT or Claude or whatever I tried it with, they came up with very generic questions that, it's as if it was written by a PR firm. So I was interviewing Ginny Rometty, who's the first female CEO of IBM. I stuck her manuscript in there, and I there's a lot of data about her. So I said, okay, so what should I ask her in a podcast? And the questions were stuff like, well, what do you see the future of technology to be? And that's such a bullshit question. I would never ask that. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but you're right. The way that I usually liken these tools, especially generative AI, is none of it is going to be turnkey, but it will give you a running start on almost anything. And so you have to use it that way, right? You have to use it like this will get you going in that direction.
Why not?
Is it copy and paste?
Yes.
Not
yes.
if you value your work product,
Listen, in that spirit, I'm going to tell you something that maybe I'll regret telling you, because, who knows how many people are going to hear this. But so I created with a company something called Kawasaki GPT. And Kawasaki GPT has all my manuscripts, all my blog posts, all my videos, and all my transcripts. So the data set is really Guy and his podcast. And you can go to Kawasaki GPT and you can ask me a question. And I promise you, the answer you get from Kawasaki GPT is better than what Guy Kawasaki would probably give you. So now when people ask me for forewords or blurbs or guest essays, guess where Guy goes as his starting point? He goes to Kawasaki GPT and he asks himself the question as a first pass.
Yeah, but look, that's really smart. I mean, because you're going to review the output. You might make some edits to that, but it's probably going to be in your voice because obviously it was trained on your voice. So, it's interesting. I think as we think about publishing now in the age of ChatGPT, will we see more people doing kind of like what you did, where you'll take your manuscript, you'll run it through, you'll basically create an LLM trained just on your manuscript. Then now you have an interactive bot with all of the information and ideas in your book that people can interact with, in addition to reading the book.
Well, yeah, I mean, they can interact with it, and pretty soon there'll be like generative AI version of Guy, right? So it'll be like I'm talking to you personally, like the real thing, right? I mean, that day is coming. And so in a sense, what it's offering me is immortality, because as long as there's electricity and there's electrons flowing, and my estate pays the bill, Kawasaki GPT will live on.
That's great. It's interesting. When you talk about the avatar, Reid Hoffman recently did that. He created a video avatar of himself trained on his information that he was then having like a conversation with to kind of see. We're entering some very fascinating times. And I want to kind of extrapolate from that a little bit, because I think one of the unique things about your background is you've been on the front row of technology and the digital evolution for decades. And so, there are a few people that have as deep of a sense as you do, I think, as to where we've been. And I want to take that forward a little bit in terms of where we're going, but I want to frame it a little bit, not so much to, what do you see as the future of technology? But I want to kind of narrow this down more towards work, right? When you think about, and I'll go 3 years out, because 3 is probably even a stretch to figure out what our world's going to be like in 3 years, but I won't go beyond that. But when you think about, how we're able to leverage, again, these new AI tools in work, we're seeing tools that are replacing customer service, humans, engineering humans in some cases, and we're only going to see more of that. So our workforces are going to look different. The nature of work itself will look different. If you had to kind of leverage everything you've seen and, kind of combine that with this, what the things you're picking up on of where we're going, what does the world of work look like in 3 years to you?
I don't know, but I hope I'm around to find out. I am in a particularly fortunate place because there's a lot of Guy Kawasaki data to input, right? But if you're just starting in your career, or you're not a writer or something like that, how does it get the data to fake being you? I have a lot of data to do that, but most people don't. So that's like, how do you do a core dump, basically? And maybe that's an opportunity for some entrepreneur. How do you get a core dump from a person who has never written a blog post, never written a book? Of course, you could make the case, if you never did a blog post, never written a book, never wrote a song, never done anything, who cares about your LLM?
I mean, maybe we're going to see some Neuralink, use cases coming up. That's we'll have to see.
Let me tell you something. Elon Musk is the last person in the world that I would let him put something in my head. I won't even drive a Tesla. I sure as hell not letting him put a chip in my head.
But let's think about it for a moment. I mean, so we're kind of today we're at this place where like we've moved away from this industrial era construct of work, right? That tightly defined where and when and how. We have hybrid work now. We have remote work. We have flexible work. I think that we've kind of turned the page on that legacy model of work, and yet here we are, 2 to 3 years from now. We're going to be turning the page again to something else that I don't know what it is. I mean, how do you think the average person should think about preparing themselves? And you get into this in the book a bit, where you talk about resilience and grit. And I do want to come back to that. But what advice do you have for the average person who obviously doesn't have the same access to all the history that you do, to think about adapting as this new world unfolds?
Well, let's be even more specific. So let's say that you are a student right now, right? Yeah. And you're trying to prepare for the future. Man, if I were you, I would jump head first into AI. And I don't mean study AI, but you got to use, I mean, it would be, if in the 1990s, you told a student, don't worry about computers. Computers are not going to affect your career. Just stick with your abacus and stick with your rapidograph and stick with your stainless steel ruler because computers are a fad. Where would that person be today if you listen to that kind of advice? So I'm not telling you that you have to major in artificial intelligence or major in machine learning, but you have got to learn how to use the tool, just like you learned how to use personal computer, just like you learned how to use the internet. Because if you don't, man, you are going to be hurting, man. You are going to be so far behind. You have got to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I will take your point towards students and I would apply it to anybody listening to this right now. I mean, this is the time is now and the person is you, regardless of what role you're in.
I think a lot of, people, they're let's say they're a small business entrepreneur. I mean, they're saying, well, yeah, if I'm Elon Musk or if I'm CEO of IBM, I understand how I got to use AI. But listen, I just own a restaurant. Like, what am I going to do with AI, right? And I'll give you one use case. So you own a restaurant. You are highly dependent on Yelp reviews. I think anyway. That's at least that's how I make a judgment on restaurants. And so you're thinking, like, how do I optimize my Yelp review? And I would say to you that, listen, go get ChatGPT, copy and paste the Yelp reviews that are placed, and tell ChatGPT, compose a response to this comment. And then ChatGPT will, in 10 seconds, will spit off this great response. And then you could say, ChatGPT, let's have some fun. Make it a poem as a response. Or make it a rap song. Yeah. And so now, you're a small business owner, you're a restaurant owner, and you're responding to Yelp reviews with poetry and rap. And I got to believe that will, at the very least, it's fun. But I got to believe it'll set you apart from the other people who are, just saying, thank you very much for your kind regards. We'll take all customer feedback into our into our decisions, and we appreciate your business and look forward to serving you again.
Yes, copy and paste. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Glassdoor, right? On the kind of company review side, you see that, and so why not bring a little more, flair to that? Exactly. I want to get into thinking remarkable because obviously, you've written many books over your career. This is your latest iteration. Let's just level set and define remarkable from your perspective. Like, how do you, what is remarkable to you?
I define remarkable as making a difference and making the world a better place. So, my podcast is called Remarkable People, not rich people and not famous people. And my book is Think Remarkable, not Think Rich or not Think Fame. And so this is about people. And now, on the other hand, I don't want to overshoot and make people think that, unless I'm Jane Goodall or Steve Jobs or Stacey Abrams, this book is not for me. I think that, a high school teacher is remarkable. A high school teacher can have such effect on 30 kids a year, 60 kids a year. And so it's not the size of how many computers you sold or how many, millions of dollars you've raised for the environment. Have you made a difference? It could be literally to just one person, and you could be remarkable.
I really appreciate that framing because I think it does support the anecdotes and some of the stories that you share within the book. And, there's three key pillars that you touch on: growth, grit, and grace. Yeah. And you break down those across the book. But I want to just touch on questions about a couple of the areas within each of those.
Okay.
So first of all, go ahead, please.
I am very proud of the fact that I could come up with a tricolon. And not only is the tricolon alliteration, but it's the first two letters of one syllable words. I mean, that's one of my proudest moments, to come up with a tricolon with two first letter alliteration all one syllable. And then I thought, for the future, when I die, I'm going to have this book, the section will be growth, grit, and grave. So I got that all lined up already. So the growth mindset is based on my friend Carol Dweck, about how if you want to be remarkable, you have to have a growth mindset. You have to believe that you can change, you can learn new skills. The grit section is my friend Angela Duckworth, and that, if you want to grow, guess what? Growing is hard. I mean, by definition, if you're growing, you're pushing the edge. And so you need grit. You don't just, it's just not going to fall in place for you. And then the third part is my realization that remarkable people, they make a difference. And towards the end of their career, they make a flip and they decide, it's not about me anymore. It's about helping the next generation.
Yeah.
So I think if you truly want to be remarkable, you start with grit and grace. You start with growth and grit, and then you move on to grace, and that will make you remarkable.
Yeah. Well, hear you describe that now going back to the dedication on your book to Gen Z, that makes a lot of sense. I can kind of connect those dots. I want to come back to the grit piece in a second, because one of the sections, the subsections in grit, talks about the ability to jump to the next curve. And I would love to get your thoughts on how do you, especially in this environment where it feels like change is so constant and these curves are shorter, right? Because we're kind of moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing in seemingly, shrinking iterations. How do you do that? How do you ensure that you're able to kind of identify those next curves to be able to get in there early enough?
I think you have to do a lot of sampling, and you also, honestly, you have to do a little bit of retroactive justification. like you say, I knew AI was going to be big,
I'm going out on a ledge here.
Yeah. No, you didn't. 2 years ago, you weren't even saying the word AI. Now you're saying you knew it would be big. I think it's a lot of sampling. I think it's taking a lot of shots. There's an ancient Chinese saying that you have to stand by the side of a river a very long time before a Peking duck will fly in your mouth, which is to say that, ducks don't fly into your mouth. You got to go out and kill the duck. And so that's what you have to do. And as Steve Jobs said in his Stanford commencement, the only way you can connect the dots is looking backwards. And so you have to just take a lot of shots. I kind of conclude the book with this, we spend so much time these days in trying to make the right decision using LLMs and using AI and using big data. But really, for many decisions, you simply do not know what the right decision is. You take your best shot. And then what you have to understand is, instead of ruminating on making the right decision, you should make your decision right. Which is, you put it in place and you keep working at it until you make it right. Because the concept that you make the right decision, that's the hard part, and the rest is easy, is flawed. It just does not work like that.
Yeah. No, I like the way that you reframe that. And I want to come back to the grace for a moment as well, because part of the book, you also explore imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And the ability to navigate that. And I would love to have you just expand on that a little bit, because I think a lot of people, again, when you're in that growth mindset, you're intentionally putting yourself in places where you are uncomfortable, where you do feel like you're over your head, where you are, just trying to get through and learn. So like, how do you recommend people who do embrace that growth mindset, try to navigate the potential imposter syndrome that comes with that?
Well, several things. So first of all, the fact that there is a syndrome called imposter syndrome shows you how prevalent it is. So I think step number one is realize that lots of people have the imposter syndrome. Lots of people walk into situations and think, oh my God, everybody else here is more qualified than I. I'm a fake. They're going to figure me out, and then, I'm going to get thrown out of here. Lots of people think like that. In fact, I would make the case, If from time to time you don't have imposter syndrome, you're probably delusional. You got the other problem. You got the entitlement syndrome. And between the two, it's much better to have the imposter syndrome than the entitlement syndrome. It's much easier to fix imposter syndrome. So first of all, realize that lots of people have it. So many people have it that it's been named. And then you have to understand that, you know, you need to focus on your accomplishments. So instead of thinking about like, why am I here? You know, how have these people been so fooled? Think of what you truly have accomplished. Now, I don't want you to go overboard and think, oh my God, I accomplished so much, I deserve this, right? That's a little too far, but you should not be like thinking constantly like, I'm a fake. And so that's the second step. And the third step is to surround yourself with people who are supportive of you, that will say to you, you know, listen, yeah, okay, so maybe you're not as qualified as everybody else on paper, but you are plenty qualified and you can do this. I'll tell you a very interesting factoid. So we interviewed probably 250 people, and I would say 60 or 65% were women. There are more women on Remarkable People than men by far. And many, many women mentioned the imposter syndrome. Not one man said I had imposter syndrome. You think about that for a second. And it's not because men all deserved what they got. Let's just say, okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a realization that lots of people have it. I have done good things. People support me, and just keep pushing. Just keep pushing.
Yeah. Well, Guy, I enjoyed the book. I've enjoyed your work. I appreciate, your leadership in this space. And I appreciate introducing us to Kawasaki GPT and all these other cool things that you're building. So what, if our audience wants to get their hands on the book, follow your podcast, or just stay more connected directly to your work, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Let's just say that if you are unable to find my book, you probably are not going to be remarkable, because it's not so hard to find my book. And if that little hurdle stops you, I mean, you got a lot of other problems coming. Now, I am, however, going to remove this one hurdle about getting the book, because there are people who don't like to read, or there are people who, don't have the money to buy the book. So I'm providing you this link here. This link is a free online Canva course that Canva and I put together on how to be remarkable. Now, honestly, it's not as complete as the book, but it will get you there. So that's an alternative for everybody. And I just want people to know, I want this book to be kind of a life guide, a coaching manual for life, and to help you, navigate the challenges you're going to encounter, and, keep your eye on the ball about how to make a difference and be remarkable.
Yeah. Well, look, I think you've done that. And I think that it also comes at a moment of time right now where I think resiliency, especially from a professional standpoint in your career, your ability to build, your network equity, learning agility, there's so many different things that you go into in the deep into the book with, grit and grace and growth. It's all right there. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me. All the best to you.
I'll take care, Guy.